Homage to the fundamental teacher Buddha Shakyamuni. Homage to the wisdom warrior Manjushri. Homage to all the lineage masters. The supreme subtle Dharma is rarely encountered in eons. Now we hear and follow it. May we realize the Tathagata's meaning. To liberate beings, please generate bodhicitta. Today we will discuss the Platform Sutra. The teachings on the Platform Sutra will be concluding soon. I am not sure what we will study next. The teachings on the ornament of clear realization will also be finishing shortly. For today, let us continue with the Platform Sutra. How should I approach today's teaching? It is a bit challenging to explain. Today we are on chapter 10, his final instructions. Just as in tantric teachings, the final chapter often includes the entrustment of the teachings to Dharma protectors and destined disciples. Similar themes are present here. In this regard, it is the same here. Throughout history, great masters have, towards the end of their lives, passed down their Dharma lineages to disciples with the appropriate karmic connection. Historically, whether in the Tibetan areas, the Han region, or India, great masters frequently transmitted their lineages very clearly and publicly to specific individuals. Sometimes the transmission was not as explicit, but they bestowed it silently through a mind-to-mind blessing. Here, the sixth patriarch ultimately entrusted his Dharma lineage to his 10 major disciples, instructing them to continue protecting and upholding it. One day, the master summoned his disciples Fahai, Zucheng, Fada, Shenhui, Zuchang, Jitong, Jiche, Jidao, Fajen, and Faru, and said to them, "You are not like the others. After my parinirvana, each of you will be a master in a different region." At that time, the sixth patriarch in his later years, as he approached parinirvana, one day called together his primary and most capable Dharma disciples. Among them were primarily Fahai, whom we mentioned earlier. Fahai was the one who ultimately compiled the Platform Sutra. He was an extraordinary individual who made immense contributions. Similarly, for Mipam Rinpoche, many of his works from that time, and also those of Khenpo Shenga and Shechen Gyaltsap, there were several. Their extremely precious teachings were recorded in writing. For future generations, this was an incredibly significant contribution, because at that time, under their tutelage, there were many, such as Situpanchen and others, but they primarily focused on giving oral teachings. However, another group took these precious teachings of the masters, including important commentaries on the 5 great treatises, and committed them to writing. So regarding Fahai at that time, I feel that among all the disciples, his contribution to future generations was likely the greatest, because generally, some great masters might not be very famous while they are alive. Just like Long Chenpa, he wasn't exceptionally famous during his lifetime. Over in the Utsang region, many people knew of him, but many also slandered him, and he even faced expulsion and other hardships. It was only later, through his written works, that people truly recognized his wisdom and compassion. Here we have Fahai and also Zicheng. Earlier we learned he was sent by Master Shenshu to steal the Dharma. There is also Fada, who had chanted the Lotus Sutra 3,000 times and was quite arrogant at first. Shenshu, who came to follow the Master at the age of 13, he was probably quite obedient. Jichang and Jitong, I believe they appeared earlier. Jichang came specifically to assassinate the sixth patriarch, but later became enlightened. There is also Jidao. As for Fajen and Faru, they haven't appeared in the Platform Sutra yet, have they? But actually, these figures are all recorded in various Zen histories. These individuals and many others. At that time, the master called them over and told them, "You are not like the others." What does not like the others mean? Perhaps for the sixth patriarch, having taught the Dharma for so many years, he had many disciples, but some disciples might have brought not only no benefit to the master's Dharma lineage, but possibly even harm. Although he didn't say it explicitly, some perhaps lacked the ability to continue propagating the Dharma. Some might have just been there to listen to the teachings, and ultimately they just went back to busying themselves with making a living. So these specific individuals among his disciples were different from the rest. The sixth patriarch said, "You are different from the others. After my parinirvana, you should each go to different regions and become great masters, taking on the heavy responsibility of propagating the Buddha Dharma. Generally speaking, when a master is alive, many great practitioners gather together. After the master passes away, reasonably speaking, many of them go to their respective regions and begin to propagate the Dharma. Therefore, the purpose of our studies, everyone should also understand this, is to first go somewhere to seek the Dharma. In the process of seeking the Dharma, you must completely abandon your arrogance and other worldly concerns and earnestly receive the teachings. Finally, after acquiring the Dharma yourself, you should either go to a secluded place and truly practice it, or try your best to pass on this bright lamp to the confused people of the world. This is extremely important. So, as the sixth patriarch was approaching parinirvana, he didn't say, "After I die, how should my house be handled? What about my belongings?" At that time, there might not have been money or things like that anyway. Nowadays, some worldly people, when they are about to die, often think about their property, think about their relatives. How should my family be taken care of? How should they be comforted? And so on. But as a practitioner, when they are about to leave, they are different from others. They place exceptional importance on their Dharma lineage, ensuring the teachings they have transmitted continue to be propagated in different places. Because such propagation is a way for them to repay the Master's kindness, and for the disciples, it is also deeply meaningful. Therefore, he spoke about matters concerning what would happen after his parinirvana. I will now teach you how to preach the Dharma without losing its fundamental principles. First, you must employ the teachings of the three categories and utilize the 36 pairs of opposites. In coming and going, immediately detach from the two extremes. When speaking of all phenomena, do not depart from their inherent nature. So how should they propagate the Dharma? The content of what to propagate has already been covered earlier. The sixth patriarch said, "Today I can also teach you the methods for propagating the Buddha Dharma in the future. The most crucial part of this method is without losing its fundamental principles. Any disciple who upholds a lineage still needs wisdom. You cannot lose your own tradition. For example, if I study the Zen tradition my whole life, and then at the end I start propagating the Vinaya school, it would probably be very difficult to succeed. If you study tantric teachings your whole life, and at the end try to study another tradition, it might be very difficult. Of course, if for the sake of skillful means to guide others, you propagate other Dharma gates, mastering all phenomena, that is entirely reasonable. But the most crucial thing is not to abandon your own school, not to abandon your own tradition and lineage. This is extremely important. For many of our fellow practitioners here, in the future process of propagating the Dharma, it is very important to propagate the lineage you have studied, the teachings you have learned. Otherwise, I'm afraid in terms of dependent origination, it might not necessarily be very successful. When His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche passed away, his final advice was, do not abandon your own path, do not disturb the minds of others. I feel that do not abandon your own path, do not forsake your own spiritual path, contains profound meaning, as I have emphasized repeatedly. One aspect is your own school, your own Dharma practice, your own master, all your own lineages. These are all encompassed within it. Therefore, here he also consistently emphasized, saying, it is best that the Dharma principles of our own school not be abandoned. So how do we not abandon the Dharma principles of our own school? He first employed the teachings of the three categories for them, and also the 36 pairs of opposites. These will be explained below. These in coming and going immediately detach from the two extremes. Coming and going seems to mean entering and exiting, or moving about. In daily life, ordinarily do not depart from the two extremes. That is to say, do not fall into either extreme. Detach from the two extremes. Do not fall into one extreme either. Acting in this manner is truly reasonable. In whatever you do, if you fall into an extreme, it is unreasonable. When speaking of all phenomena, never depart from their inherent nature. In the ultimate truth, there is the inherent nature of emptiness. In conventional truth, there is the conventional illusion-like nature or the inherent nature of all appearances. The inherent nature of both the ultimate and the conventional we cannot depart from. This is a rule. If you depart from this rule, whatever you do cannot possibly succeed. Do not fall into the two extremes in anything you do. Acting in this manner is truly reasonable. If someone suddenly asks you about the Dharma, let your words always be in pairs, always utilizing opposites. Coming and going are mutually dependent causes. Ultimately, The two phenomena are completely eliminated, and there is nowhere further to go. Next he says, when you are propagating the Buddha Dharma, or in the process of your own practice, if someone asks about certain principles of the Buddha Dharma, let your words, your answers, should have pairs from two sides. Pairs means using language from two perspectives to explain. Below, he explains some paired dharmas, two-sided, you could say dual use, in terms of vocabulary. Unlike some people today who talk about emptiness, emptiness, emptiness every day, falling into the extreme of emptiness, some people constantly talk about appearances, 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 falling into the side of appearances without considering the aspect of emptiness at all. It shouldn't be like that. Both sides are needed. Actually, our behavior should be like this too. Sometimes we need to consider the perspective of the Buddha Dharma, and sometimes we need to consider worldly matters. We must consider both the conventional truth and the ultimate truth. In this way, whatever we do will have a sense of balance, a middle way. So he says here, when someone asks a question, it's best that you don't fall into one extreme. Don't be too absolute. Only speaking of one side and not considering the other is probably not going to work. In this way, coming and going are mutually dependent causes. Later, when he explains the 36 pairs of opposites, he will also mention that any phenomenon is mutually dependent and mutually conditioned. Therefore, temporarily speaking, using paired dharmas or dual meanings is very reasonable. Ultimately, the two phenomena are completely eliminated. When reaching the ultimate state, in the fundamental wisdom of a noble being's meditative equipoise, or when reaching the most ultimate state of all phenomena, all these dualistic phenomena, whether black and white or appearance and emptiness, everything, all is completely eliminated. There is nowhere to go, nowhere to come from. No arising, no ceasing, no coming, no going, neither permanent nor severed, and so on. In the end, even the wisdom of a noble being's fundamental meditative equipoise cannot be found, let alone all other phenomena. So temporarily speaking, when someone raises a question, it is best to consider both sides. Actually, I feel this is very important when we study any Dharma practice. For example, if someone asks about the principles of karma, you need to think about the principle that karma is infallible in the conventional world, and you also need to think about the fundamental nature of this infallible karma, which in reality is also emptiness in the ultimate truth. If you can consider both aspects, it should be quite reasonable. I hope that some of our Dharma teachers, when propagating the Buddha Dharma, can also consider both aspects. For the Dharma teachers in our academy, I believe your knowledge of Buddhism is very solid. Compared to ordinary worldly people, it should be quite excellent. However, in terms of worldly matters, you might be somewhat lacking. Sometimes, perhaps, including when you go out to propagate the Dharma or answer questions here, I have asked everyone to organize some salon activities. The purpose is to cultivate and train you. Train what? To consider both the principles of the Buddha Dharma and the mindset of worldly people. Therefore, when I go to some schools to give talks, I also try my best, while not abandoning the fundamental principles of Buddhism, to align with the worldly perspective as much as possible. We must care about it. Some people today also think that there is no need to talk about the things worldly people already know, but that's not the case either. The things some people know today can be difficult to explain when combined with the Buddha Dharma. So for our Dharma teachers, the lectures I give at universities when I go out, many of them don't watch. They feel they are too shallow. But actually, perhaps for you in the future when facing society, they might be more important than profound Buddhist philosophy. I have this consideration, because on this issue I have spent a long time exploring and reflecting on my own. At the same time, I also understand the mindset of people today. If you don't approach it this way, and you only talk about the 12 links of dependent origination, or emptiness, 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 will the audience really benefit? Because many people in society today need practical benefits, especially those who do not believe in Buddhism, those without faith, and even people in some schools and corporations. 30 or 40% of them might not necessarily be interested in Buddhism. But if they can be presented with the correct path through theories and principles, combined with the social issues they frequently care about, it will still be beneficial to them. So I hope we realize that the Buddha Dharma is actually meant to truly liberate the minds of sentient beings from suffering. Therefore, at the Academy, basically for a period last year, we distributed our university speeches to everyone. But later it seemed no one watched them. Even some Dharma teachers, Khenpos and Khenmos, they didn't watch them either. They didn't even look at the titles. They were handed out and just tossed aside. If this is the case, I feel perhaps my wisdom is insufficient, or perhaps many of you have already transcended this level. But when I talk about some Buddhist topics, you pay attention. In reality, what might be more important? Nowadays, we cannot be too shallow. If it's too shallow and vulgar, we don't want that either. But it cannot be too profound either. If it's too profound, in any school, corporation, or non-Buddhist group, you won't even be able to explain a single term, so it's completely useless to them. No matter how much Dharma we teach them, it won't necessarily be beneficial. Here it says, we must consider both sides. This is very important. Next he mentions, the teachings of the three categories are the skandhas, the dhatus, and the ayatanas. The skandhas are the 5 skandhas. In many ancient translations, the 5 skandhas are often translated using a different Chinese term. What are the 5 skandhas? Form, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness. The 5 skandhas. In the Abhidharmakosha, they are also explained quite extensively. We won't go into detail here. These terms, this actually shows that the Zen tradition also acknowledges the concepts explained in the Abhidharmakosha, such as the 5 skandhas, the 12 ayatanas, and the 18 dhatus. They are not discarded, just as when we study entering the middle way. From form all the way up to omniscient wisdom, these phenomena all have their definitions and establishments. This is true for Madhyamaka, and it is also true for the Zen tradition. The conventional phenomena from the 5 skandhas to the 12 ayatanas have not been abandoned. Nowadays, some people who study Zen seem to think, these are all empty. These are all wondrous functions of Zen. We don't need to care about them. Actually, that's not true. The 6th Patriarch says here, and everyone should know, the ayatanas are the 12 ayatanas. This means the 12 sensory fields. The ayatanas are the 12 ayatanas. 6 sense objects: form, sound, smell, taste, touch, and phenomena. 6 sense bases: eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. The dhatus are the 18 dhatus, 6 sense objects, the 6 sense bases, and the 6 consciousnesses. The 6 objects are the 6 sensory objects. The 6 sense bases are the 6 sense organs. Then there are the 6 consciousnesses. The inherent nature can contain all phenomena. It is called the container consciousness. The 6 sense bases, the 6 consciousnesses, and all phenomena. The inherent nature can contain all phenomena. It can also be called the container consciousness. The container consciousness is actually what we often call the alaya vijnana, the 8th consciousness. When it is recognized, actually once it is slowly recognized clearly, it transforms into the mirror-like wisdom. According to the tantric teachings, when the alaya of sentient beings first stirs, Samantabhadra Tathagata has already recognized its true face. There is no confusion, no wandering in the world. If it is not recognized and conceptual thoughts arise, then it's like us worldly sentient beings continuously being reborn in the 6 realms. If it gives rise to pondering, it becomes the transforming consciousnesses. If the container consciousness does not give rise to pondering, the suchness of the entire Dharma realm remains in its fundamental state. According to tantric teachings, this can also be applied here in the Zen context. If one gives rise to pondering, if one gives rise to conceptual thoughts, imputed conceptual thoughts, then it becomes the transforming consciousnesses. The defiled mental consciousness, the manas consciousness. Once the defiled mental consciousness arises, the view of the transitory collection I and mine begins to exist. After this, it gives rise to the 6 consciousnesses as mentioned earlier: eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, and so forth, the 6 consciousnesses. Then these 6 consciousnesses manifest through the 6 sense bases, emerging from the 6 sense organs: eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and so on. Then they perceive the external 6 objects: form, sound, smell, taste, and so forth. It gives rise to the 6 consciousnesses which manifest through the 6 sense bases and perceive the 6 objects. Thus the 18 dhatus all function arising from the inherent nature. These 18 dhatus within the Dharma realm of the inherent nature are non-dual. Luminosity and emptiness are non-dual and undifferentiated. However, because we sentient beings have not recognized it, the 18 dhatus begin to appear. The Abhidharmakosha explains the 18 dhatus. Those who prefer extensive explanations use the 18 dhatus to explain. Actually, they can also be included within the 5 skandhas. If the inherent nature is wrong, it gives rise to the 18 wrongs. If we do not recognize our inherent nature and give rise to confused conceptual thoughts, then the 18 dhatus become the causes of cyclic existence. The 18 wrongs of confusion, if the inherent nature is right, it gives rise to the 18 rights. If we recognize the fundamental nature of these 18, the wisdom, in this case the 18 dhatus are all right, they become the right view. If applied for evil, it is the functioning of an ordinary being. If applied for good, it is the functioning of a Buddha. If we apply them for evil, failing to recognize it, and remain constantly defiled by the afflictions of attachment, aversion, and ignorance, then sentient beings will continuously wander in the 6 realms, cycling through suffering. If we recognize it and apply it properly, then the 3 kayas and 5 wisdoms of the Buddha will manifest, and various enlightened activities to liberate sentient beings will appear. From what does this functioning arise? It arises from the inherent nature. What exactly is this functioning? We just mentioned functioning and not functioning, wondrous functioning, as spoken of in the Zen tradition. In our tantric teachings, we often speak of wondrous power or manifestation. So what exactly is this functioning like? Actually, it is non-dual and undifferentiated from the inherent nature. The so-called functioning has never been separate from it for even a moment. The ornament of the Mahayana Sutras also states this. We sentient beings are confused, while the Buddha is awakened. Confusion and awakening are merely one and the same. There is no major difference between them. It is merely the difference between recognizing and not recognizing within the Dharma realm. Therefore, fundamentally, within the Dharma realm of the inherent nature, it has never been separated. So what does this refer to? It refers to conventional phenomena. There are many conventional phenomena. Here the Zen tradition brings up the Abhidharmakosha. Some Dharma teachings from the Shravakayana are also discussed here. But the way it's discussed here is slightly different. We recognize the fundamental nature. If we recognize its wondrous functioning, then all these can become the causes for attaining Buddhahood. What was just discussed is the teachings of the 3 categories. That's a brief explanation. Next, he explains the 36 pairs of opposites. Opposites regarding external phenomena. 5 pairs of insentient objects. Heaven and earth, sun and moon, light and darkness, yin and yang, water and fire. These are 5 pairs. It seems Master Yampe's commentary on the Platform Sutra explains this quite extensively, but I don't think it's necessary to go into such detail here. Everyone should know this. Actually, the opposites here, some are completely opposite, what we often call antonyms. Some are contrary phenomena, as explained in epistemology. Some are not completely contrary, but merely mutually dependent. For example, left and right, front and back. There are also cases like this. The terms mentioned in the Platform Sutra, some of the distinctions are not as strictly rigorous as those discussed in epistemology. Generally, what the great Zen masters are expressing overall represents some of our mindsets. He explains this principle as long as one does not fall into the 2 extremes and grasps the appropriate balance in the middle. It's not. He also just said, if someone asks about the meaning of the Dharma, you must let your words always be in pairs, always utilizing opposites. If someone says heaven, you should say earth. The 6th Patriarch often did this earlier as well. If someone said existence, he would say non-existence. Every monk, whether a novice or a senior monk, when they came, if the other person spoke of conventional truth, he would immediately shift to ultimate truth to explain it to them. His disciples also liked this approach. In the future, we should also, when someone says heaven, we say earth. When someone says sun, we say moon. When someone says light, we say darkness. Yin and yang, water and fire. In this way, these are called opposites. This is regarding external phenomena, insentient objects, 5 kinds of opposites, 12 pairs regarding phenomena and language, language and phenomena, language and phenomena, Actually, the scope of phenomena is very broad, but language, generally the words that come out of our mouths, it and other phenomena besides language, fundamentally the meaning of phenomena encompasses 10 meanings and so on. There is a lot of content, so in this context, language and the objects expressed by language could be regarding the object and the subject. It can also be explained this way, so here they are not necessarily completely opposite. Some might be corresponding in terms of their isolates or mutually dependent, existence and non-existence, form and formlessness, characterized and characterless, contaminated and uncontaminated, form and emptiness, movement and stillness, purity and turbidity, ordinary and noble, monastic and lay, old and young, large and small. These are 12 pairs. Earlier was regarding phenomena and also regarding their language. Some might be in terms of vocabulary, some in terms of the phenomena themselves. For example, between form and emptiness, between movement and stillness, their characteristics, their fundamental entities, their essence are all corresponding. For example, turbidity and purity, ordinary and noble. These can all be explained this way. These are 12 pairs. Together with the previous 5 pairs, that makes 17 pairs. Adding the next 19 pairs. 19 pairs regarding the functioning of the inherent nature, long and short, wrong and right, ignorance and wisdom, foolishness and intelligence, disturbance and samadhi as opposites. Compassion and toxicity or a toxic mind, toxic harm, precepts and wrongs, upholding precepts and non-precepts or committing wrongs. Compassion and toxicity, precepts and wrongs, straight and crooked, true and false, steep and level, afflictions and body, permanence and impermanence, compassion and harm. Earlier was compassion and toxicity. Compassion and harm can also be opposites. Pity and toxicity can also be opposites. Joy and anger, generosity and stinginess, advance and retreat, arising and ceasing, dharmakaya and formkaya. The dharmakaya is the fundamental nature of all phenomena, spoken of from the perspective of emptiness. The formkaya is spoken of from the perspective of manifestation. They can be opposites. Nirmanakaya and sambhogakaya. Between the nirmanakaya and the sambhogakaya themselves, as I just mentioned, perhaps they differ in certain isolates. For example, the sambhogakaya is the pure kaya seen by noble bodhisattvas called the sambhogakaya. Then the nirmanakaya generally refers to the various emanated kayas manifested before impure sentient beings in the 6 realms. Are they completely corresponding or opposite to each other? Certainly we cannot say that. But just like the root and branches of a tree, one is the basis of manifestation, the other is the manifestation. From this perspective, it can also be called an opposite between Nirmanakaya and Sambhogakaya. Nirmanakaya and Sambhogakaya. These are 19 pairs. 36 is enough, right? These are the 36 pairs of opposites. In the future, we can also often speak like this. When someone says afflictions, we say bodhi. When someone says permanence, we say impermanence. This is how we debate. But actually, debating isn't just saying the opposite to break their argument. In reality, genuinely considering this is very important. Nowadays, people might just emphasize compassion, for example, but they don't know the opposite of compassion. Including myself, I might think I am very compassionate, but do I have uncompassionate, extremely toxic behaviors that harm others? Also, when one feels they have some wisdom, does one still have foolishness? Within oneself, there can also be much observation. Therefore, in the Zen tradition, when studying the Dharma, one does not merely emphasize one side. For example, if one only emphasizes emptiness and pays no attention to the aspect of manifestation, or if one only cares about stillness, quietness, and resting in peace, how do they handle the arising of thoughts? These are all things that we, during our practice, also need to consider carefully. The Master said, if you understand and apply these 36 pairs of opposites, this is the way. It runs through all sutras and teachings, in coming and going, immediately detached from the 2 extremes, when the inherent nature functions, in conversation with others, externally exist amidst characteristics, yet detach from characteristics, internally exist amidst emptiness, yet detach from emptiness. He explains it here like this. The 36 pairs of opposites have just been explained. If we understand, if we comprehend these 36 pairs of opposites, then this is the true practice of the way, the true way. This kind of practice or state of realization can run through the profound meanings of all Buddhist sutras and teachings. It is extremely meaningful. Ordinarily in our daily lives, we will not fall into the two extremes, immediately detach from the two extremes, detach from falling into extremes. The extreme of existence, the extreme of non-existence, the extreme of permanence, the extreme of impermanence. At all times in our lives, we should consider the two extremes. Indeed, whether in Dharma practice or worldly matters, it is also very important. Some practitioners, as I have often said, some of us are very devout toward the Buddha Dharma, very diligent, but we lack communication with the world. We lack certain skillful means in worldly affairs. Because of this, although one might have a certain level of realization, this practice is often subjected to criticism and slander by others. Why? Because one only considers the Buddha Dharma and does not consider worldly matters. Some people, regarding worldly matters, are very proficient and wise, but in terms of the Buddha Dharma, they frequently violate the law of cause and effect, often contradicting the true principles of the Buddha Dharma. Therefore, I often think like this. A while ago, when several Khenpos from our academy were giving teachings, we weren't just praising our own lineage master, but indeed, regarding His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche, we increasingly feel that in his process of propagating the Buddha Dharma, there are many things that we later students need to learn from. On one hand, he heavily emphasized spiritual practice, but at the same time, regarding interacting with people and handling affairs, he also placed special importance on this aspect. At the same time, he also taught, for example, regarding elegant sayings and the rules of nobility. If we talk about it every day, if we are exceptionally concerned with worldly socializing but have no contact whatsoever with the profound aspects of Buddhism, I'm afraid that in the realm of spiritual practice, it will be extremely difficult. But it's not like that either. Whenever he encountered the profound contents of empowerments or the profound views and conduct of tantric teachings, he possessed an incredibly transcendent wisdom and compassion. At these times, he would spontaneously reveal his extraordinary and sagely states of realization. At the same time, toward anyone in the world, even those at the lowest levels, he also had many teachings. So for us in the future, we might need to consider both aspects. If you don't intend to propagate the Dharma extensively, and you just consider yourself a solitary practitioner, just passing through life, waiting to die, then you can just be like that. Don't interact with anyone. If you just have a meal with someone, and afterwards you've offended everyone. Actually, sometimes due to a lack of skill in communication, a lack of skill in handling relationships with people, in a very short time, many people are offended. This is also a form of our ignorance. As Buddhists, we shouldn't be like this. Buddhists should be more skilled at communicating on minor issues, and on major issues, when facing these problems, they should possess transcendent wisdom. This is the behavior of the wise. Therefore, I suggest that everyone should not completely fall into one extreme. Being too worldly, if you are busy with worldly affairs every day, you might not attain any spiritual realization. Indeed, in this society, today's society can be said to be increasingly chaotic. More and more people are getting sick today, various kinds of illnesses that didn't exist before, including current ones, various kinds of depression, syndromes, and many caused by air pollution, environmental pollution, food pollution. Even the clothes we wear contain many things detrimental to our health, so our human mindset might be getting increasingly chaotic. But at this time, perhaps we personally need some states of realization from the Buddha Dharma that ordinary people cannot experience. This is quite important. But more importantly, when we propagate the Buddha Dharma among such populations in the future, what is even more crucial is to have a resilient mindset ourselves. This is very important. Currently, we have a few fellow practitioners who often say, "Someone insulted me, someone criticized me," and they can't even handle a single remark. Such practitioners are truly pitiful. Unable to handle a single remark, no matter how grandly such a practitioner speaks, I'm afraid it's unreasonable. Worldly people cannot handle it, which is understandable. They can't take it, they can't endure it, they have no choice, their minds are very fragile. Especially now I have interacted with many so-called postdocs and PhD students. From the perspective of worldly knowledge, they should be at the absolute pinnacle, but their mindset is exceptionally fragile. If you talk to them for just 5 minutes, you have to check their facial expressions 5 times. Are they unhappy? Will they immediately be overly sensitive? It's just like all of a sudden, this society has become like this now. If something is said slightly wrong, they immediately choose to commit suicide. Actually, many times it is caused by language. In such a society, if we as practitioners are exactly the same as them, I'm afraid this practice hasn't played a very significant role. Therefore it says here, immediately detach from the two extremes when the inherent nature functions in conversation with others, in any arising thought, in all our actions. When we speak with others externally, we must exist amidst characteristics, yet detach from characteristics. There is existing amidst characteristics, and there is also detaching from characteristics. Just as Longchenpa said, a truly skillful master, on one hand, is just like a worldly person, but on the other hand, is also different from a worldly person. When we understand these principles, on one hand, we are detached from characteristics. Actually, regarding these worldly words, worldly praise, admiration, and wealth, I am not attached to them. I have already detached from these characteristics. But on the other hand, in manifestation, it appears as if I comply with worldly people. This is called possessing both existing amidst characteristics and detaching from characteristics, not falling into the two extremes. Then, internally, one has already departed from this emptiness, but there is also an emptiness of existing amidst emptiness, yet detaching from emptiness. From the perspective of internal realization, on one hand, toward all worldly phenomena, one does not cling to them like worldly people do. But it is not a state of mere emptiness either. One has also detached from emptiness. One has transcended both emptiness and non-emptiness. Actually, if you truly understand these 36 pairs of opposites, you will grasp the middle way. You will recognize the middle way. If one is completely attached to characteristics, it fosters wrong views. If one is completely attached to emptiness, it fosters ignorance. If we constantly cling to external characteristics, then it fosters wrong views. One has no understanding of the true nature of all phenomena, but merely clings to characteristics every day. One has no understanding of emptiness whatsoever. If we completely cling to a kind of emptiness, then that also fosters ignorance. Because one only clings to a kind of mere emptiness, therefore one looks down upon all accumulations of merit and all spiritual practices. Actually, the Zen tradition's Platform Sutra still provides many pith instructions for future students. However, it is likely that many of us merely remain at the level of words. It would be a great pity if there were no one to pass the teachings on. In the Han region, many people go to temples to burn incense and bow to the Buddha. Some are solely preoccupied with these rituals, while others neglect them entirely, rather than maintaining both. When you are out of meditative equipoise, burning incense, bowing to the Buddha, and accumulating merit through it are still exactly what you should be doing. You should embrace these positive appearances. But when you are in meditation, practicing primarily from the perspective of the ultimate truth, all of these are recognized as emptiness. In this way, we will comprehend the true reality of the Dharma, both its aspect of appearance and its aspect of ultimate reality. Actually, these are the true characteristics of phenomena. Just as in the Sword of Wisdom for thoroughly determining reality, this principle is consistently established. The truth of both the ultimate and the conventional. Those who cling to emptiness slander the sutras by saying that they have no use for words. If they say they have no use for words, then they should not even speak, for speech itself is a form of words. Some who cling to emptiness often directly slander the meaning of the Buddha's sutras, or the teachings and treatises of the great masters of the past. They say directly, our Zen tradition does not establish words, we don't need anything. If that were truly the case, if one truly did not use words, then the language we speak would also be words, making their claim illogical. Is such speech not itself a characteristic of words? Because so-called words, human speech is called natural words. When it takes an external form, it is called symbolic words. If you truly do not establish words, then even saying do not establish words is a contradiction in human language, and yet you are clearly still speaking. Therefore, for those who cling to emptiness, slandering the world of appearances is simply another misguided path. I believe there is a story in the Sutra of 100 Similes. A poor man was traveling and searching, and finally in a wilderness he found a treasure chest filled with gold, silver, and precious gems. Overjoyed, he opened it. When he looked inside, There was a mirror placed on top, and his own reflection appeared in the mirror. Because he was quite foolish, he thought this person had been inside the chest all along. He said to the reflection in the mirror, "I am so sorry, I didn't know you were in here," and then he simply ran away. What is the meaning within the Buddha's teaching? We worldly beings, wandering in cyclic existence, suffer greatly from clinging to appearances, so we seek liberation. While seeking liberation, we happen to encounter the Buddha Dharma. Encountering the Buddha Dharma is like finding that treasure chest. At that moment, if one is preoccupied only with a concept of emptiness, it is actually like that man who was afraid of the reflection in the mirror and ran away. He has not truly entered the profound meaning of the Buddha Dharma. So whether we speak of the Zen tradition or Tantric teachings, if one merely clings to a mere emptiness, it destroys many conventional accumulations of merit, which is also unreasonable. They also say that the direct way does not establish words. But these two words, not establish, are themselves words. When they hear others speaking, they immediately slander them, saying they are attached to words. Some people are like this. They say directly that the path of our practice is in fact not establishing words. Just now we spoke of speech. Now they say the path itself does not establish words. But if you do not establish words, then the two words not establish are themselves words. Our practice of the way does not establish words. Well, if it doesn't, then the very phrase not establish consists of words. Furthermore, these people, when they see others teaching the Dharma or writing treatises, or when they see others performing virtuous deeds, frequently slander them. What you are doing is incorrect. In the state of Zen, there are no words to be established, nothing to be practiced. In doing so, they destroy the wholesome roots of others, which is also highly improper. Therefore, when we understand a little about emptiness, this principle of emptiness must not become a cause for destroying conventional wholesome roots. You should know that to be confused yourself is bad enough, but to slander the Buddha's sutras is even worse. Do not slander the sutras. The karmic obstacles created would be countless. You should understand that if you are very foolish and confused yourself, then so be it. But by being preoccupied with this kind of emptiness and this idea of not establishing words, you are merely being foolish. In reality, you are constantly slandering the Buddha's sutras, which is unacceptable. You must never slander the profound meaning of the Buddha's sutras. If you continue in this way, your karmic obstacles will be infinite and boundless, because the sin of slandering the Dharma is truly terrifying. This is especially true for those with a bit of eloquence. Among our Dharma assistants in various places, some are quite good, but I have also noticed some starting to give misguided guidance. For those trained at our academy, basically many Dharma teachers are well monitored. Through long-term interaction, including exams, we have an understanding of their wisdom. But among the lay groups outside, I have noticed that a few individuals, though they are quite eloquent and sound very convincing, actually do not understand the meaning of the sutras at all. Some even focus entirely on gossip or supernormal powers, constantly boasting about their own merits every day. In the process of transmitting the Dharma, we monastics generally speak very little about our own merits. Even if one has some slight realizations or experiences, before the public, following the tradition of His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche, one would not speak of them. How much more so for some lay practitioners who, after studying Buddhism for just a few years, say, "Oh, you won't believe the dream I had last night. Do you know what state I am in now? I have heard that lay practitioners in certain places have completely lost the traditions of our school." In the future, try to avoid this. Even though they might speak with great flourish, it actually does not conform to the meaning of the sutras. Some even frequently boast about themselves. For such people, I hope our management personnel will gradually revoke their qualifications, because currently we do not lack people who talk about supernormal powers. Our society's propagation of the Buddha Dharma does not rely on talking about supernormal powers. If one truly possesses them, the Buddha has already spoken about this in the Vinaya and the Sutras. Unless there is a special necessity, it is not permitted. The day the Malaysian Airlines flight went missing, some people said the people on board had not died. Later, many people criticized them online. At that point, they stopped talking. They said our master has supernormal powers and says they are all alive. For foolish lay practitioners to speak on behalf of a master is quite ridiculous. At such times, they don't necessarily have supernormal powers. So we must still emphasize that Buddhism is a form of education. Using true principles and education to convince others is what is most important. If one clings to characteristics externally and seeks the truth through rituals or extensively establishes places of practice and talks about the faults of existence and non-existence, such a person will not see their nature for eons. If one, regardless of the aspect of emptiness, constantly clings to external characteristics, seeking some external formal liberation or truth, or spends all day establishing places of practice and talking about the faults of existence, non-existence, right and wrong, such a person, because they fundamentally do not understand the profound meaning of emptiness in Buddhism, no matter how much they talk over countless eons, some just cling to appearances, to a superficial kind of merit. But in reality, this does not involve the wholesome roots conducive to liberation. In that case, one cannot attain liberation even after countless eons. It is merely worldly merit for human or God rebirth. There is no chance for true liberation. Simply listen to the Dharma and practice accordingly, but do not stop thinking of everything, as this will block the nature of the way. Next we come to the true pith instructions. We only need to rely properly on a spiritual teacher, listen to the Dharma, and practice accordingly. Do not stop thinking of everything, not thinking of good, not thinking of evil, not thinking of anything at all. This can be an obstacle to the Dharma and to our path of practice and liberation, so we should still practice according to the Dharma, accumulate merit according to the Dharma, and clear away obstacles through merit and wisdom. Do not simply stop thinking of everything, even the good. Before you have reached that high state of realization, you cannot do that. This is not the view of the Zen tradition either. If you hear the teachings but do not practice them, it will instead give rise to wrong thoughts. Simply practice according to the Dharma and give the Dharma without attachment to characteristics. If we only listen to some teachings, only speaking of them with our mouths, but do not practice them ourselves at all, it might cause others to give rise to wrong views and cause oneself to give rise to negative thoughts as well. Actually, practice in Buddhism is very important. I feel that Tibetan Buddhism is ahead in this regard. The path of practice is predefined. According to the view of Master Vasubandhu, hearing, thinking, and practicing. On the basis of pure discipline, one hears, then reflects, and then practices. If you have not practiced, even if you are a Dharma teacher or whatever your status may be, you are only speaking with your mouth. But in reality, you have never personally reflected within your own mind stream. For even a single moment, you have not given rise to faith, nor to compassion, nor to bodhicitta, nor have you even reflected on the view of emptiness. Then, no matter how much you speak to countless people, there is actually nothing there. It's just like playing a recording. It has no real meaning. Therefore, practicing according to the Dharma is very important for the individual. Otherwise, at a certain point, everyone will start to have wrong thoughts. So, practice according to the Dharma, and ultimately, the profound Dharma gate of non-abiding emptiness should still be shared with sentient beings who have the karmic connection. Give the Dharma and constantly turn the wheel of Dharma. Some of us say constantly turn the wheel of Dharma, turning the wheel of Dharma before many people. We must practice the giving of the Dharma. If you realize this, speak according to it, use it according to it, act according to it, and behave according to it, then you will not lose the fundamental principles of our school. When you understand these principles, your mouth should speak accordingly, your mind should use them accordingly, and your body should act accordingly. Not only should you practice this with your own body, speech, and mind, but you should also help others to do the same. This is not losing the fundamental principles. This is how I explain it. It's probably fine, it's a matter of the wording, I haven't seen others explain it this way, but it should be stated like this. Actually, for any pith instruction from a master, simply understanding it at the level of the mouth or the written word is not enough. One should apply it with one's body, speech, and mind. The body uses it, the mind uses it, and the mouth should speak of it. Furthermore, not only should you be like this yourself, but helping others to be the same is truly not losing the fundamental principles. When we study the Buddha Dharma, everyone should put it into practice in this way. If someone asks you the meaning, if they ask about existence, answer with non-existence. If they ask about non-existence, answer with existence. Next, the sixth patriarch explains this to them in detail once more. If someone asks, what is existence? You use non-existence to respond to them. If someone asks about non-existence, you say it is existence, because in the conventional world, it still exists. If they ask about the ordinary, answer with the noble. If they ask about the noble, answer with the ordinary. The two paths are mutually dependent, giving rise to the meaning of the middle way. For all these relative phenomena, you can use their opposites to find the middle way between them. Actually, the middle way spoken of in the Zen tradition is likely not the same as the one in Madhyamaka, which is free from the four extremes and 8 complexities. It is neither existence nor non-existence. At that moment, it is neither good nor evil. In that very moment, you recognize the original face of your mind. But what we talk about in Madhyamaka is neither existence nor non-existence nor both nor neither. We examine these in great detail. The Zen tradition, however, does not do this. It is a form of recognition through pith instructions. In that recognition, it is neither existence nor non-existence. In that very moment, you observe your own nature and you will comprehend it. This is the method. Just as with one question and one answer, do the same for all other questions, and you will not lose the underlying principle. What was mentioned above regarding the ordinary and the noble, existence and non-existence, all the other 36 pairs of opposites are the same. Just as with one question and one answer, the same logic can be applied to all other principles. In this way, you will not lose the principles of the school. Suppose someone asks, what is called darkness? Answer, light is the cause, and darkness is the condition. The cause and condition here might be slightly different from those in epistemology. They are also somewhat different from those in the Abhidharma Kosha. If someone asks what darkness is, you can answer, light is the cause and darkness is the condition. When light is gone, there is darkness. Using light to reveal darkness and darkness to reveal light, their coming and going are mutually dependent, forming the meaning of the middle way. You can answer that light is actually the cause and darkness is actually the condition. Once light is gone, darkness will appear. Darkness appears because of light, and light appears because of darkness from the opposite side. As for what darkness is, you use the cause of light to dismantle it. In this case, it is the cause of destruction. Among causes and conditions, one is called the cause of arising, and another is called the cause of destruction. Here, light and darkness are contrary. In reality, when one is present, the other is already absent. This cause is not the true cause spoken of in epistemology. It is a nominal cause. When light is absent, darkness appears. Darkness appears in relation to light, and light also appears in relation to darkness. Their coming and going are mutually dependent. This coming and going of causes and conditions. It is not darkness, not light, not white, not black. This kind of middle way is what is called the meaning of the middle way in the Zen tradition. All other questions are like this. When you transmit the Dharma in the future, pass it on from generation to generation in this way, and do not lose the fundamental purpose. For all other questions, you should apply the same logic. When you propagate the Dharma in the future, you should follow this, passing it down from one generation to the next. From the previous generations of Zen, it has been passed down like this. Whether it's light and darkness, or the relationship between functioning and recognition, you should pass it on this way in the future. Actually, whether it's the Zen tradition or Tantric teachings, the Buddha Dharma is passed down from generation to generation. When it is passed down this way, then this generation, the previous generation has already passed it to you, and our generation passes it to the next. This is extremely important. I hope all of you here, with the transmissions and the essential teachings we have received, will also continue to pass them on in the future. Do not think, oh, I have received it now, I have gone to the Tibetan areas to study for 5 or 6 years, or over a decade, so now I am fine on my own. A scholar in the Tibetan areas once said, to give up this body is not a pity, but to give up my wisdom and the truth is a great pity. So before we leave, it is best to pass the truth in our hearts to those with the karmic connection. This is very important. I believe that by relying on different conditions of dependent origination, there will be such opportunities in the future. So he says here, pass it on from generation to generation in this way, and do not lose the fundamental purpose. You see, the 6th Patriarch said earlier, do not lose your own fundamental school. This is very important. Let's stop here for today.
Banzang Padma Sodargye Patriarch Padma Sodargye Patriarch Padma Sodargye